I'm an old Pokemon fan who's been into the game since around Gen 3, particularly LeafGreen and FireRed. I've played the other iterations of Kanto though. I got Yellow version as a hand-me-down first, but soon after, my heart replaced it with the shiny new GBA remake. Between the two, I feel like the Kanto experience peaked at LeafGreen and FireRed. Updated graphics, countless bug fixes, an entire post-game. But most importantly, I think, was the inclusion of a girl character option. I remember feeling a little frustrated as a kid that Yellow didn't let me play as a girl. That's why I was so happy when I could finally play as someone who looked like me. It made me feel like I could really throw myself into the world of Pokemon. Recently, I'd grown bored with my 3DS Pokemon games and wanted to relive the magical experience of Kanto and Johto all over again. I didn't want to reset my old childhood games though, so I turned to the wonders of eBay. Conveniently, someone was selling FireRed and HeartGold in a lot together for really, really cheap. Of course I was suspicious. The seller seemed to have made an eBay account just to sell these carts, and authentic carts were obviously worth way more. But since I just wanted to briefly play through for nostalgia, I decided getting a couple bootlegs was no skin off my nose. And boy, did I ever get an interesting pair of bootlegs. Starting with the FireRed, or should I say, LeafGreen. At the time, I thought it was a shoddy bootlegging mix-up, but the contents of the game inside proved it was very intentional. Judging by the lack of a player name, the unreal amount of playtime, and perfect 150 Pokédex, this game was clearly hacked. Intrigued though, I booted up the game to see what kind of Pokemon the seller left behind for me to play around with. The game started up in my humble home, standing in the same tile as the beginning of the game. But I noticed my character was staring straight at me, rather than facing the TV as she would normally. My name was totally absent from the menu too, showing as a blank space. Pressing the A button did nothing to open it. Not to mention the strangeness of having a Pokédex, but no Pokemon. Despite this, the Kanto Pokédex was totally full. If I wasn't sure about this being a fake hacked game, this sealed the deal for me right away. But I thought, whatever, I'll just go to Oak's lab and get a starter anyways. First I wanted to pick up the potion from my PC if it was still there, but the PC wouldn't turn on. It looks like it hasn't been used in a long time. Instead, it displayed this text, which told me the seller didn't just hack my Pokédex, but the entire game's ROM. Curious, I checked some other objects to see what else had been changed. Whose clothes are these? It was clear this hacker was trying to tell a story, and it had officially caught my interest. I went downstairs to check the TV, since I knew it was the one place where the narration was in first person. It's the end of the movie. The girl with pigtails is tapping her heels together to go home. Why can't I do that too? It left me with a really sad feeling, like I was in a place that wasn't my home. Wasn't this my house? I talked to my mom, but no matter which direction I spoke to her from, she wouldn't face me. It was like she was totally ignoring me. I stepped outside to see that even my mailbox didn't want to acknowledge me. Oak wasn't any better than my mom was. It looked like 2 Pokemon were already taken, or maybe the hacker intentionally only left one behind. You received nothing. Ouch. Oak really was giving me the cold shoulder, wasn't he? But whatever I took off his desk must have been some kind of Pokemon, since it unlocked that part of my menu. Or maybe it really was nothing. However, pressing the A button opened the menu as if a Pokemon was there. Selecting the summary took me to my trainer card instead, startling me. Her face was scribbled out, and her name was replaced. I hastily mashed B and decided to read the mail instead, though it was just as unpleasant to look at. Is this what it's like to disappear? Even without a Pokemon, I was free to explore outside Pallet Town, since Professor Oak didn't care to stop me. Even the wild Pokemon's behavior was off. Their sprites were flipped, as if even they refused to look at me. Every time, the wild Pokemon would fail to see me, and then run away and end the battle automatically. Thankfully, the encounter rate seemed incredibly low, so it only happened once in a while. I figured that was still going to get annoying eventually though, so I stopped by the Pokemart for some repels. Unfortunately, it wasn't just the folks back home who refused to speak to me, but every NPC. This made things like the Pokemart and Pokemon Center unusable. Of course, I wasn't going to give up hope yet. If this hacker was going through the work of changing every NPC's text to silence, it wouldn't make for an interesting hack. It had to have some purpose, I just needed to look for it. If people wouldn't talk, maybe the flavor text for objects would give some insight. The questionnaire in the Pokemart had a message filled out. Someone supposedly caused this, leaving me to be ignored by everyone and everything. But who? I decided to take a peek inside the local gym to see if anything had changed. Despite being in a post-Giovanni state, the game acted as if I hadn't won the gym at all. Where is your name? It even acknowledged this. I kept snooping around the gym to see if Giovanni was present, but was surprised to see my rival Blue standing there. I started to wonder if maybe this hack took place sometime between FireRed and LeafGreen and HeartGold and SoulSilver. I ended up discovering by accident that I could walk through the roadblocks like the trees, as if I was some sort of ghost. It made for a leisurely stroll through Kanto, I guess. Unfortunately, my efforts for unique text was mostly in vain, since a lot of the TVs and shelves had the same text as before. However, I did still manage to find one more instance that stood out from the rest. It's the script. Peeked at the ending. You're not in it. In Game Freak's development room, the plot took a turn for the meta. The computer mentions an ending without me in it. But why? What horrible fate awaited me? Well, with no other leads or notable differences, I spent a ridiculous amount of time wandering and brainstorming, until I realized I could use my ghostly walking to cross the water as well. If normal NPCs wouldn't talk to me, what would this game do if I was forced to fight against the Elite Four? But it seems the hacker thought of this too, because somebody stood in my way. None other than the champion Red himself. I spoke to him, and I thought he was just going to give me the same silent treatment everyone else had. But suddenly, the screen flickered to black for a couple of frames, and when it was over, Red was standing in my spot. Confused, I walked around for a moment, realizing I was now playing as him. I opened up the menu to see what had changed. There he was, confidently posing as if he was blissfully unaware of what he just witnessed. Red had his whole team with him, whose moves are all about the same as they were in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Despite saying that they belonged to Red, it also said I had only apparently met them. They all had the same nature, quiet. I thought Red's Pokemon were just giving me the same silent treatment as everyone else, but that proved not to be the case. In fact, every NPC was suddenly talking to me. Not just that, but all the unique flavor text was back to normal too. Everything I had just witnessed was no longer there. It was like the hacking had gone away, and I just had a totally normal cartridge. Well, except for one thing. Hoping I could still bring the hacked text back, I tried resetting, only to see my save file overwritten with Red's. So, I decided to start a new game, hoping that choosing the girl option would re-trigger the hack. However, to my dismay, I wasn't given a choice. It led me straight to naming Red, and that was it. It was just like the good old days of Generation 1. I figured that was all there was to the hack, which left me empty and disappointed. It must have been a prelude for what was to come, though. This was only half of the story. So I plopped the HeartGold cart into my DS and quickly skipped the opening cinematic just to see if this game was hacked too. And it was. There were no other options besides continue and new game, but I wanted to see what the save file had to offer before erasing it. Somehow, the save file had even less to it than the first one. It was Mount Silver's peak, with no one standing there, and no way I could move or open any menus. Nothing. It was clear there was nothing to this save file, so I reset and went to choose New Game. I was about to begin my adventure, but then I read the warning text. Warning. There's already a saved game file. If you start an adventure now, it will be murder. It will be murder? Who was I murdering? There was no one here, and there was nothing to hear. It still freaked me out enough to get me to back off, but I decided maybe outright deleting the save file would let me start a new game without any of the weird guilt-trippy text. So I went back to the title screen and pressed up, select, and B. Delete all saved data? Once data has been deleted, there is no way to recover it. It started off pretty normal. I thought I was in the clear. Furthermore, you will be committing murder. But it seemed this game had some foresight. There was no way out of it. Even though I didn't want to commit any sort of murder, I didn't pay for a useless cartridge, so I reluctantly chose yes. After the save file was totally gone, the game started back up with the opening cutscene. Oak was there to greet me as normal, introducing me to the world of Pokemon. Curiously, he sent out a Nidorina instead of a Marill, which immediately tipped me off that this game was going to be more Kanto-centric. The moment came where Oak asked the infamous question about my gender. I was surprised I even had a choice, but I was even more surprised by what those choices were. On the bottom screen appeared Red, fully sprited. To his right was a familiar silhouette, who was blacked out for some reason. I wanted to go right back to playing as her, even though everything was trying to gravitate me towards Red. But as I chose her, the enthusiastic music stopped, and the screen cut to black. Another text box appeared. No. You are a boy. I was thrown aback. Somehow, this managed to be even crueler than not giving me a choice at all. Without choosing his name, Red appeared on screen and began to shrink down. The young boy stood in his room, leaving me to explore it. But before that, I made note of the bottom screen. Like before, Red owned a Pokédex but no Pokémon. Checking it showed all 150 Kanto Pokémon owned, again. But more interestingly than all that was the 6 Pokéballs at the bottom of my menu. I had a sneaking idea on what those would be for. I checked to see if Red was carrying any other items, only finding a few full restores for Pokemon that Red didn't have on him. While I was looking, I noticed that the Pokeballs Red had didn't actually appear in his bag. Other than the full restores, Red didn't seem to have anything else on him. I checked Red's trainer card next. On the top screen, it only showed the Kanto gym badges. Janine and Blue were replaced with Koga and Giovanni. On the bottom screen, I could see Red and his shining silver trainer card in all its glory. I checked the date at the bottom, January 29th, 2004, which is apparently the release date of FireRed and LeafGreen. I was a bit impressed by the attention to detail. This hack really was trying to replicate the Red experience. But where did his Pokemon go? Before going to find out, I decided to poke around Red's room for a bit. I haven't used this in a long time. Interestingly, the text was not only in first person, but in Red. It made me think this text was from Red's point of view. Mom threw out my NES while I was gone. I also took note of the fact that Red was a lot saltier than I initially expected. After that, I went downstairs to speak to Red's mom. Oh, you're heading out again. Stay safe out there, Red. You're the only kid I've got, you know? It hurt my heart just a little bit, seeing his mom worry about him so much. But there was no time to dwell on that. It was time to find Red's Pokemon. I stepped outside, originally intending to walk toward the tall grass to possibly trigger a cutscene with Professor Oak, but instead found a familiar face, looking out upon the grass. Talking to Pikachu from the back triggered no response from it. However, trying to walk out into the tall grass caused Pikachu's cry to play, stopping Red and making him turn towards it. Then the battle started up. Pikachu appeared, with a very neutral expression that was neither happy or sad. It just seemed to stare straight through Red. The heads-up display appeared, showing the same Pokeballs I saw before. Not having many options, I just went straight for the ball. Judging from the text, I realized this functioned like Pal Park. Pikachu was caught with no incident. The text seemed less enthusiastic than usual about the capture, though. Instead of giving me any sort of nicknaming screen, it told me that Pikachu couldn't be nicknamed because of a different original trainer. It confused me, since it was supposed to function like Pal Park and normally wouldn't give me this information. I went to Pikachu's summary screen to see what was up. It said it had arrived from the Kanto region. That checked out just fine. However, the OT's name had totally bugged out, saying this Pikachu didn't belong to Red, but to some unknown trainer. Otherwise, it was identical to Red's Pikachu, now sporting its moveset from HeartGold and Soul Silver. Closing out of the menu, I tried speaking to the little guy. Pikachu is staring wistfully at the fallen leaves. Pikachu seemed more interested in leaves than interacting with Red. I tried talking to it again, but it said nothing and retreated into its Pokeball. I guess it had no interest in following Red around. At least Red had a Pokemon to protect him though, so I took the road to Viridian City. All the wild Pokemon encounters went as normal, save for being unable to select the Pokeballs. I was hoping for some kind of pattern with Red's other Pokemon, so I retraced the steps I took in LeafGreen back to the Viridian Gym. Lo and behold, standing next to Blue was Red's Blastoise. Red, there you are, buddy! Where have you been? They made me the gym leader. Is that cool or what? Of course, you'd know that if you just visited once in a while. I bet you only came back for your old friend Blastoise, huh? Go on then. Blue exchanged some pleasantries with Red before giving him the okay to catch Blastoise. Blastoise simply let out its cry, and the battle started. It also seemed to have a more neutral, possibly tense expression. Still, just like Pikachu, it was recaptured with no problem. And same as Pikachu, it told me that Blastoise had a different OT. After the fight, Blastoise remained in its ball, unlike Pikachu, so I just talked to Blue again. Hey, once you get your team together, let's battle again. Just like old times, right? Something gave me the feeling that Red had other plans after this. Wanting to check up on Red's newly caught Blastoise, I went to the party screen to investigate. It was much like Pikachu. Quiet nature, strongly defiant, HeartGold Soul Silver moveset. It was identical to Red's Blastoise in every way, except it was holding a snowmail. It carried a strange message from an anonymous sender. Every trainer should get to be a hero. I didn't really understand it, but I presumed the others would be holding messages that might provide more context. While I was in the neighborhood, I headed west from Viridian and over to the gate which led to Victory Road, Mount Silver, and Johto. Sadly, Red wasn't allowed to explore Johto, but that probably meant there was nothing for him there. However, he was allowed to go to Mount Silver, where I saw another familiar Pokemon. Snorlax blocks the way. It will wake up on its own later. It seemed like Red wouldn't be able to enter Mount Silver, probably at least not without his other Pokemon first. But there was still the Pokemon League left, so I decided to check over there while I was still nearby. I noticed that all the rocks in Victory Road had been pushed away, as if it had already been walked through before. While I was in no state to battle the Elite Four and Lance, I figured I might as well try to see if there was something waiting for me. As Red walked into Will's room, the door didn't close behind him as it normally would. I could walk out if I wanted to. Will didn't battle Red, and the door ahead of him opened up. It went like this for all of the Elite Four. I approached Lance, who had Red's Charizard standing beside him. I've been waiting for you. Your Charizard is restless. Unlike Pikachu and Blastoise, Charizard seemed actively aggressive. The battle began, and I started feeling tense. Charizard's mouth was agape, making me think it was going to start spitting fire at Red at any second. Still, I had no other option than to throw the ball at it. Red threw the Pokeball, but the counter didn't decrease. Charizard somehow managed to knock the ball away, which caused Red to reprimand me. Don't be a thief. but on the bottom screen, the ball option had changed to fight. I nervously selected it, still worried that Red was going to get scorched by the angry Charizard. But Red threw the ball again, with the counter going down for real. Contradicting his previous narration, he specifically went out of his way to steal this Charizard. It went into the ball with no further resistance, and no musical fanfare to congratulate me on a capture well done. It reminded me, again, that Charizard belonged to someone that was clearly not Red. But if not Red, then who? Charizard came here for a reason. Why did it run away from you? Lance spoke to Red with concern, asking me the same question that I was. It seemed like Red had owned these Pokemon in the past, but they all ran away. Is that why they had a new trainer? What did Red do to make them hate him so much that they would want a new trainer? My brain still rattling with ideas, I tried walking into the Hall of Fame, maybe to get some more answers. My name no longer rests behind this door. The door refused to open, and Red refused to enter. I looked over this line in even more confusion, but I realized that since Lance was the champion now, Red's name must have been removed from the Hall of Fame. Charizard was also carrying mail, which I looked at next. But my world, your RPG, won't allow it. Again, the text seemed to be leaning pretty heavily on the fourth wall, which reminded me of my next location. Where else would I go for fourth wall breaking other than the Game Freak building in Celadon City? I'm the game director. Filling up your Pokedex is tough, but don't give up. The director kept up his normal, friendly dialogue for a moment. Oh. You're not here about that, are you? Right. Your Venusaur is up on the roof. But then he broke his friendly act, and told Red exactly what I needed to know. I ran out immediately to catch it, deciding I'd talk to the other Game Freak employees afterwards. Venusaur looked sadder than the other Pokemon. It knew something I didn't, something about why it ran away, and that made it look miserable. Red took no pity on the poor thing and caught it anyway. Still, the victorious Pokemon caught music didn't play. It gave me the same text about its different OT, and then I ran back inside to speak to the game director again. You're wondering what Venusaur was doing up there. Just as I thought, he had new dialogue. We were going to give your team to you personally, but something went wrong. Ask the programmer about it. I did as he told me and spoke to the programmer. Something showed up that we didn't program in. We think that's why your Pokemon all ran away. The programmer gave me an incredibly vague answer that didn't tell me much. What showed up? A glitch? I tried speaking to the other employees, but their text was all seemingly normal. I'm the president here. We are remaking an old game, but this is quite a challenge. Old fans would not want us to mess with their good memories. So that's why we removed her. I was quickly mashing through the president's text so fast that I almost missed this. The nostalgic tone of the dialogue was totally thrown off. She wasn't necessary, we decided. Haha, what am I saying? It's always just been you, Red. I was starting to understand the story, but I was so caught up in talking with Game Freak that I forgot about Venusaur's letter. This is revenge for every girl they forget about. Between the letter and the president's words, I was completely certain of my anonymous sender's identity. So she was the one who made Red's Pokemon run away. But why? What did she have against Red specifically? Did she steal Red's Pokemon from him? Or is Red stealing them from her? And if her revenge was just scattering his Pokemon, he was doing an easy job getting them back. There had to be more to her plan. Unfortunately, I had no hints on where Lapras was, so I just kept wandering around aimlessly for a while. None of Red's Pokemon knew Surf, and I figured the hacker knew that. Wherever Lapras was, it was on land. Eventually, I made my way to Saffron City and started talking to NPCs out of boredom and desperation. It wasn't that long ago. This group of thugs called Team Rocket was involved in wrongdoing. They were abusing Pokemon. But bad things never last. A boy did a wonderful job and Team Rocket was disbanded. Everyone around town kept singing Red's praises. It was so scary when Team Rocket took over the city. Thank you so much for scaring them away, Red. You're so cool. Really, singing them. This is Silphco, famous for Pokemon merchandise. In the past, Team Rocket wanted the company because of that. But then, a boy came in and drove them out all by himself. I almost brushed off these NPCs, but the woman actually reminded me that Lapras can be obtained from Silphco, so I went inside to investigate. Lapras was waiting, sitting alone in a corner and staying as far away from Red as it could. When I approached it, it refused to turn around. Even in battle, it refused to face Red, as if it was disgusted with his presence. That didn't stop him from easily recapturing it, though. It seemed like he was getting tired of this too, as the text was even flatter than it was before. I took a quick look at Lapras's letter. Every story they take and give to Red instead. The reason this was happening finally came to light. She wanted to be the hero of the story, but Red took it away from her. And now, she was out for revenge. But what was she going to do? I wasted no time in trying to find out, making my way out of Silphco into Mount Silver where Snorlax awaited me. But as I stepped out of the door, the screen stayed black for a little longer than normal, and a text box appeared. A boy named Red saved Kanto from Team Rocket. A boy named Red. I pressed A to progress the text as normal, and suddenly, the screen started scrolling faster and faster, overlaying over itself and even bleeding out of the text box. I kept holding the B button, wanting it to be over as soon as possible, but it seemed to go on for half a minute. I finally managed to close out of the text box, and Red was right back outside of Sylph as if nothing had happened. Still feeling a bit shaken by the sheer intensity of it, I took my sweet time in walking back to Mount Silver. Snorlax is awakening with its teammates' presence. I had a hunch I needed Red's remaining team members to wake up Snorlax, and I was right. The narration got more tense. I felt like I was doing something wrong, and it was all culminating in this final Pokemon fight. Red called it back as if commanding it to return, and then didn't even call Snorlax by its name. It was like he didn't feel anything towards his Pokemon at all. Now that I had the full set of mail from each Pokemon, I read through each one again one more time, and then went to read Snorlax's.
I will take it all back for you now.
It was in all red text, like I had seen in the narration before. I finally put two and two together, and realized I had it all wrong. The red text wasn't Red's thoughts, but hers. And her thoughts scared me. Mount Silver spelled out danger for Red, and I knew it. I decided that after I closed the mail, I would get as far away from it as possible. Maybe continue to explore the region as Red, right? However, the moment I pressed down to leave, all 6 Pokeballs appeared and released his team all at once. It seemed like his Pokemon all had enough with him, and were about to give him what he deserved. Nervously, I talked to Venusaur first, hoping whatever battle that followed would allow an easy path for my escape. But no battle followed, just Venusaur pushing Red towards the entrance. I had a very bad feeling that there was no way out of this, so I spoke to the other Pokemon while I still could. Snorlax stood guard, as if Red was a prisoner about to be put on trial. I spoke to Pikachu next. Instead of any sort of description of Pikachu's action, it gave me a yes or no prompt. Do you accept your fate? I didn't want this fate. Not really. I vainly said no, hoping there was some chance that Red would be allowed to fulfill any unfinished business before being shoved into his final resting place. Unfortunately, no such request was fulfilled, with Pikachu silently stepping out of the way and Venusaur pushing Red forward again. I desperately tried talking to each of them, only giving me that same silence for each of them. I had no choice. This was the point of no return, and I was forced to take the final step inside Mount Silver myself. The screen transitioned to black, and in the darkness, another text box appeared.
Neither do I.
It was clear that she wasn't willing to negotiate this. I expected to be inside of the Mount Silver cave, but instead found myself staring at a cliff that led to nowhere. There was no apparent way forward. I tried to leave, but was stopped and pushed a tile forward.
Answer for what you have done.
I soon realized there was no collision off the cliff's edge, allowing me to walk in a straight line forward into the abyss. Not that far ahead, I found a shadow sitting by itself in the void. I tried pressing A to interact with it, but with no results. I then realized the spot was for me to stand. A text box appeared, and then right after closing it, a battle started. What I believe was Red's battle music started to play, but something was horribly off about it. It was slowed to about 0.25 times, only starting off with low rumbles as the battle transition appeared. And there she was. She stood there for longer than any trainer normally would, as if she was heavily contemplating her own actions. She looked like she had seen better days. Was it her being removed that caused her corruption, or was it from her forcing herself into the game? She finally assumed her battle stance after about half a minute, right as the slowed, distorted theme started to pick up in intensity. Red sent out Pikachu, who looked back at him for slightly longer than normal with a sad look in its eyes. I waited for a moment, expecting an opposing Pokemon to be sent out, but she just stood there, waiting for Red to make a move. Though the large fight option tried to push me to attack her directly, I still didn't really want to hurt her, even after everything. Instead, I tried to run away, still hoping for a peaceful solution to all this.
No, there's no running from me.
But as I expected, there was no way out. I still kept trying repeatedly, but with the same result every time. I unwillingly chose fight, but it wasn't Pikachu who used an attack. She was attacking without a Pokemon. Rather than knocking herself out and lowering Pikachu's stats, Pikachu instead gained a memory. It gained a memory of its trainer, its true trainer, standing right before it. Pikachu became so overwhelmed with emotion that it fled back into its Pokeball. I assumed Pikachu wouldn't be fighting for me anymore, as it automatically switched to Blastoise without my choice. She used Memento again. Blastoise gained a memory of the friends she had, like Blue, who it ran away to. Blastoise, too, switched out on its own. Charizard was next. As she used Memento again, the letter L appeared in her name. Charizard got a memory of the dreams she had, like conquering the Pokemon League, where it fled to. Venusaur was forced out next. The whole fight was entirely automated, but I still felt an overwhelming sense of dread as each of her Pokemon gave up the will to fight her. Another letter, E, appeared. Venusaur gained a memory too. When they chose not to include her in this game, she was left to die and fade away. Venusaur fled to the Game Freak building, the place where she and it both learned that painful truth. With only 2 Pokemon left, Red hopelessly sent out Lapras. The letter A appeared in her name next. Lapras gained a memory of her life, and what she did with it. She defeated Team Rocket and saved Silphco, where Lapras fled. The final letter, F, was shown, finally allowing me to piece together her true name. Snorlax remembered that same name, the name that had been erased and replaced by Red's for so long. Snorlax retreated back into its Pokeball, leaving Red at her mercy. He slid on screen to face her, with nothing to say for himself. Red paid out his life to the winner. He seemed to accept his defeat entirely. Leaf finally used a different attack, Imprison. After the attack, the screen faded to black, and another text box appeared. I tried pressing A, but all Leaf would say was silence, over and over. The only thing that tipped me off that this wasn't a game crash was the arrow still bobbing up and down. Several A meshes later, I realized that nothing was going to end this fight, so I resigned and turned the game off and on again. It must have auto-saved at some point, because I don't remember saving during my playtime at all. The option to play a new game was totally gone. Loading the game up showed Red, now standing in his famous spot, looking out over the mountain. I tried pressing down to walk away, but Red only looked south. I heard a thud sound, like he was walking into a wall, but his walking animation didn't play. Something was wrong. He was stuck. I went to my menus to investigate, starting with the Pokemon. They were no longer carrying the mail. Their message had been delivered. All of the Pokemon now had their proper trainer. The trainer they had all along. Other menus like Pokedex and Trainer Card didn't give any interesting changes. But then I finally found something interesting in his bag that wasn't there before. Its item description was blank, but I knew exactly what it was for. That was it then. I left the game running for an hour after that, just to see if anything would change. But there was nothing. Red had no Leaf to taunt him, no Johto hero to battle him, just the quiet, roaring winds of Mount Silver to keep him company. I tried everything I could think of to get something to happen. I tried deleting the save file, but the button combination stopped working. I've tried going back to January 29th, 2004. I've tried skipping ahead 3 years, 10 years, 20 years. Nothing happens. So, in the end, I haven't attempted getting another FireRed or HeartGold yet. This whole thing has left a bitter feeling in me, knowing that this is the bleak fate of Leaf and Red. No matter what I do in Kanto, Leaf dies and Red forcibly takes her place. Leaf had a life. She had beloved friends, family, Pokemon. She saved the region and became the champion. Everyone who ever played as her, everyone who gave her that life, they've all had to watch as Red came into the picture, erasing everything she had ever done. And nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about how Red replaced her, because he came first. Nobody talks about how she never got the chance to stand alongside him in Gen 1. And nobody talks about how he took her life away immediately after she finally received it. I don't think Leaf wanted to completely overwrite Red. She didn't even want him dead. No. I think if she just had the chance to stand in his spot on Mount Silver from the start, the chance to truly be his equal, none of this would have happened. But she never got it. And if Red won't give up his pedestal of being the ultimate master trainer, then she's going to make sure he never does.